Well, good evening, folks. Hope you're well. I'll crack on because I haven't got a great deal of time. I'll do the best I can. Um, I want to talk about a scientist in our country who's a marvellous chap called Dr. Bruce Lipton. And if you haven't watched any of his lectures, Lipton, B-R-U-C-E, Bruce Lipton. He's a biochemist. Well, actually, one of the best lecturers about the human body and anatomy and physiology that you will ever wish to or have the pleasure to listen to. He's moved on from mainstream education now because he really didn't want to preach the company bullshit that he was told to preach at the medical schools he was teaching at. He was a conscientious objector with that because he knew that what he was expected to teach was way off mark of the actual truth. So, top man, absolute top man. And I would encourage you to dig him out on the internet, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and listen to what he has to say. His lectures were so good, and he was so good at lecturing, that the failure rate of the biochemistry aspect of becoming a doctor improved dramatically once he took his post in the university. Indeed, students couldn't and didn't want to end the lecture session because Bruce was giving the lectures. He had them riveted to their seats, and it's no coincidence then that they performed better because Bruce has a way with words. But equally, hats off to him, he was the first to associate the importance and the connection between our environment and what it is we become. At a cellular level, well, we are just a collection of cells, so that would imply that the environment we are now in was, quite frankly, moulded and dictated our personality profile that we exist within on our daily lives. So remember the name, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and check him out on YouTube. But there was a particular thing that I was attracted to when I listened to Bruce talk. Not only his fluency and the way he got through a very difficult topic and made it child's play, thank God for me, to understand, he made it an enjoyable process. And I'm going to try and convey very briefly what the main point of his lectures were, which upset the apple cart regarding the establishment he worked for, and his position in university lecturing was made untenable because he didn't want to toe the party line of teaching the students bullshit anymore. You'll be aware as much as anybody else, I suspect, that we are all human beings and we are all made up of a collection of cells, various types of cells, brain cells, skin cells, nerve cells, liver cells. I won't labour the point, but every cell is different. No, not every sperm is sacred. That might be the case, but every cell is certainly different. But bone cells are bone cells, and skin cells become destined, Luke, to become skin cells. It's the way they roll. But what makes a skin cell and a bone cell? How do they know what to become when they're born? Because they don't just appear like a ghost. They know what they're going to become. They know what their destiny is the moment they're sprung. But what influences that? Why do bone cells become bone cells? Well, you might have heard, where did the problem start? Well, the problem stemmed from XYZ. Stemmed means originate. Yes, that's why plants and flowers and weeds have stems. It all starts from a seed that creates a stem, and on the stem things grow from the stem, don't they? It all stems from the stem, if you like. And human beings stem from stem cells. So don't get too concerned about the word stem cells. They're nothing special. Every cell is a stem cell. And every sperm is sacred, as they say. But Bruce hit on an important discovery, and lots of his colleagues became very jealous and condescending towards him and trying to put him off the scent, and didn't really like what he was saying, to such an extent he found his lectureships untenable, because he was bucking the system. It wasn't the way. It was anti-godlike what he was saying, which is far from the truth. The way it works is this. In laboratories, if you're doing scientific experiments, and forgive me if I'm telling you what you already know, but we're all beginners, if you collect cells, stem cells, from bone, skin, and let's say nerve, or cartilage, bone, let's do some easy ones, cartilage, which is the softer stuff on our knee joints and hip joints and things. This is cartilage, we all know what cartilage is, and a bone, very similar but different, and maybe skin. There's 3 easy ones we can remember. So we collect 3 stem cells. But what I'm going to do, instead of choosing 3, I'm just going to collect 3 bone cells arbitrarily. 3 bone cells off you. And I'm going to get 3 dishes, and I'm going to put 1 cell in each dish of nutrient to keep the cell alive, food, agar jelly usually. And I'm going to keep them well separated. There's no communication between the cells. They're very lonely little suckers. And I'm going to keep them in different types of food, agar jelly. And I'm going to keep some in the dark. 1 in the dark, 1 in the light, and 1 is slightly warmer than the other 2. And we start to watch. Well, we'll go for a fag and a cup of tea, and we'll be back. Bruce comes back a couple of days later, bearing in mind they all originated from the same source. So they should all be the same type of tissue. They should all become the same type of tissue from the origin. Makes sense to me. Here's the fascination. Okay, here's the headline. Newsflash. He discovered, did Bruce, that the bone tissue in a set environment where it was kept, yes, well, what a surprise, produced more bone tissue. Well, that can be expected. Moves us aside. He got another stem cell, originally a bone stem cell, from the warmer environment, let's say, arbitrarily. And it didn't become bone tissue as was expected. It became cartilage. And then he got the other one, another pot which should have become bone as well, but it was kept in a cooler environment with a different nutrient. That was knocking out skin. It had actually started to generate skin cells, more of them. And it should have been bone, like the first one. So what he tested out, he thought he'd made a terrible mistake, but he was absolutely right, actually. He hypothesized, quite rightly, that a stem cell, what its outcome is largely dictated to the environment in which you raise it and expect it to multiply within. It's the environment that dictates the outcome of what that cell will become, regardless. Well, that makes sense. But it is the sense that nobody seems to have thought of this. And Bruce, that's very simplistic what I've just said, but it's the key points. And you can transpose that, and he was absolutely right. And he was won all sorts of awards, bless him. But the establishment didn't like this idea. They said, no, don't be ridiculous. It's true. And he's been proven right. And he was so disenchanted with the world of teaching and these academic snobs and the religious zealots that, were against him. He said, do you know what, you lot, you're all narrow-minded. You can't think past your nose. I'm out of here. And he hit the alternative healthcare scene. Top marks for him. Good news for us. So that's the idea. And think about this for a moment. It's the same for us throughout our lives. The person we become, or person you become, is largely dependent. If you're a collection of stem cells, can we as a collective Borg full of stem cells of different types, they're all going to be, all of them, i.e. you, will be influenced by the environment you're brought up in, the temperature, climate, the friends you keep, the information you believe and act upon and dismiss, the education you receive, yada yada, you get the picture. Your environment, violent, loving, couldn't give a shit attitude people all around you, you become. Not only that, what also influences you big time, is what you think. And when they say be careful, you will become what you think about most of the time. Well, if you're brought up in a violent area, you become violent. And if you're in a loving household, guess what? Yes, you're catching on. And this is how personalities and traits in our society and us humans is made by Bruce Lipton. And yet he was vilified and continues to be so, but he's joined a happy few, of people who have broken free of the chains of standard education. Because the education, folks, for the most part we receive at school, is dictated to by those who seek to control us and disable us. If they had their way, they'd cut one leg off and one arm off and take one of our eyes out, such as their ability and wish to keep us handicapped throughout our lives. But the other thing about Bruce and his lectures, he also discovered at a cellular level where it was just missed by these idiots. Well, I don't think it was missed to the degree that he says it was, but you can see this information was suppressed. I don't want to get into the history of radio transmission and who invented the radio and who started all this. That's just going to drive you nuts. You probably already know, you already know this. But our world is all magnetism, vibration, frequency, and light, and whatever, isn't it? Even Tesla said this. It's the world. And electricity, of course. And we are, as I've previously said, electric light beings. Everything that happens in our body wouldn't happen if we weren't fully charged, man. We're all Duracells to some degree. But Bruce Lipton also discovered that there are certain cells in the body that use Wi-Fi to communicate. Fancy that. Because within our cells, there are set groups of cells that do this. Brain cells have this facility. Some of the basic cells don't need it. But if they need it, they need it. So those that need it will be given the option. And there are a certain cell, for example, let's say a nerve cell or a blood cell. One particularly, for example, that controls the release of hormones or enzymes. So it needs to have a to other cells throughout the body to call for action, a call to action to the other cells. For example, if you get an infection here, before you know it, or you get a bee sting, before you know it, of course, oh, it's swollen up, it's hot, it's raised, it's, oh, Jesus, a bee sting hurts bad enough, or a wasp sting. And you've got inflammation. How quick does it get red? You know, but how do they know, the cells? How do they know? I mean, they're busy down by the toe, maybe keeping your feet warm. Happy. And suddenly they hear the call. Oh my God, I can hear those trumpets. And they go whizzing along, don't they? To help out. Like the bloody fire brigade or the first aid ambulance. If you listen carefully, you can hear the sirens. How do the cells do it, was the question. Well, you can say they're chemical messengers. Well, that's very flippant. But there's another way. Certain specialist cells in our body have little aerials. Boop, 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 boop. Like little wasps have antennas, don't they? Yes, you often wonder why wasps and other insects have antennas. Why? How? What are they listening to with these antennas? Radio frequency. Ta-da! And at a cellular level, certain cells in the human body have what they call, get this, right, write it down, telomeres. These little suckers. Not just 2, sometimes 4 or 6 or 8. They have a row of them like a crown. Certain cells. And they're sending and receiving. They're listening out all the time. There has to be such an intelligence that designed the human to actually, at a cellular level, decide that the quickest way for communication is light speed or faster. If there's a problem, it sorts it out pronto, and the best way to start is to make a phone call to rally support. Well, not phone call, a radio transmission, distress signal. And this is what Lipton also proffered. And he was right. So forget humans inventing dick shit. Fundamentally, oh yes, we think about the amazement. We have DNA, the double helix. Well, that's deliberately been handicapped chemically to not really be as efficient as it could be. You know, the double helix, blah blah blah. Boring. It's not boring. It is frustrating to hell to know that humans with such fabulous potential have been deliberately castrated, metaphorically, in the DNA department. Who did that then? Something designed us. And yet we are too stupid, really. We are too stupid, all of us. We can't even get our head around the majesty of it all, can we? I've said this before. We are only now at an electron microscope level trying to, like, oh, I don't know, the great explorers hitting, you know, going through the jungle. We are still going through the jungle regarding our knowledge about ourselves. We know less than 1% of exactly how the human mind and the nervous system really works. I'll give you an example. Here's my trusty pencil. Okay. I'm sorry this is visual if you're driving and listen to this as an audio. And this is a nerve fibre, and this is a nerve fibre. And some of these nerve fibres, the longest one is which is down our leg. It's the nerve fibre that goes right down our leg. They're the longest. Okay. But some nerve fibres are very short, but let's just look at this for a moment. You have a nerve fibre, and if it's not long enough, it has to have a join, but they don't touch. What they do is each nerve fibre, excuse my fingers, okay, have a little feelers on the end, let's say 3, and there's 3 fibres here and 3 fibres here, but there's a gap. You talk about the London Underground, mind the gap. There's the gap. And that gap has little things on the end called motor end plates, okay? And they're swimming in a solution, a biochemical solution that allows the transmission of electricity to jump or bridge the gap. And we have natural movement of the nerve, whether it be sensory or, whether it be a sensory one or a movement one. 2 types of nerves, afferent and efferent, okay, remember that. Efferent are nerve transmissions that create movement, and afferent feel things like hot, cold, damp. They're sensory, rough, smooth, this sort of shit. Okay, but let's just talk about the motor ones, the ones that create movement, or indeed pain if you like. We can talk about pain nerves. Okay, they're sensory nerves. Okay. So all the time there's massive biochemical reactions going on at the points of this junction. But you don't want the nerve to be stimulated all the time, so the speed is light speed, literally, of a nerve transmission. Poof! It's over in a heartbeat, less than. But the chemical process, a stimulus comes from the brain, an instruction. It flies through these little nerve endings, these dendrites, and it meets a full stop. It has to bridge the gap by going through this chemical, which allows the connection, the nexus if you like, and that allows the impulse to jump the gap and carry out its job. But then this gap is now created again because you've got to put a stop to nerve endings, otherwise you end up continuously in a state of stimulation. You don't want that. You want to be able to relax after the event. Well, the chemistry involved at the motor end plates, the synapses if you like, is very, very straightforward. Okay? There's cholinesterase and 2 enzymes, cholinesterase and pseudocholinesterase. All right? Acetylcholine cholinesterase, sorry. Right? And when you get a muscle relaxant shoved into you from an anaesthetist and you're asleep, you go asleep, and then you're giving a muscle relaxant, that muscle relaxant blocks any transmission for the nerves, let's say, that control the muscles as a muscle relaxant. You don't want any stimulation going on. You want the muscles to be nice and floppy so the surgeons can get in the hole or move the leg around without fighting the resistance of muscle tone. But the point I'm trying to make here is we ain't invented anything of any value when you compare how magnificent you truly are. Bruce Lipton knew this and has explained stuff in such a way, okay, that it makes any other science, man-made science, look infantile. What you contain in your bag of skin, you, is so advanced We human beings are the most complex creatures on the face of this earth. But nothing, folks, nothing. You talk about a big bang. Come on. Get with the program. We were designed. Can you imagine if I give you a piece of paper to say, now then, design a human. And you're going to do let's go and say there's a class of 50. You lot design what the skin's going to do. You lot design what the blood's responsible for doing. You lot, eyeballs. I want you to develop sight and how the human's going to see. And don't forget the rods and cones. And the retina. And you lot figure out how the body's going to protect itself from disease. How many people in the design team would it take to design a human being with all its wonders? And yet we're disposed of by those out there with a bullet in our heads in war. So matter of fact. It's an abomination. Don't tell me that you're worthless. Ever. If you think you're worthless, really? I know people who will give you a lot of money for your organs, but they don't want to pay for them. They'll just shoot you and take them anyway. They'll create a false flag. They'll get the casualties. And a lot of people, folks, in a lot of countries, including Britain, I might add, have their organs taken out of them without their relatives even knowing. I know it happens. Okay, missing children. Where do you think they go to? What do you think are harvested out of the missing children? There's hundreds of thousands of children go missing on the face of this earth. What for? Once the paedophiles are finished with them and the sex slaves get bored because they prefer little boys and things, but once the little boys grow up, they're murdered. They're harvested, folks, because there's huge money in the organ world, if you get my meaning. Once they get, and any others are obviously sacrificed before they reach puberty because they produce better, sweeter blood. But before they kill these kids, truth be known, these children are released in the woods on large country estates, and they are run through the woods and chased in a state of horror, with their adrenaline screaming through their bodies. And then they are slaughtered. Their organs are harvested and sold off, or they're eaten, because they are full of adrenaline and other hormones. And their blood is drunk by these Satanists. What an absolute tragedy and a waste. I have to say that I have to mention Maddie McCann, this young girl. I had a particular interest, actually, not an interest, but I remember her name amongst others, but hers I do recall very well, because I noticed the photograph of that child, Maddie, you know, the young daughter of a GP and two GPs, I think they're both GPs, the McCanns. But certainly something very fishy going on with the McCanns. But I did take note of Maddie, because I noticed her eye, and she had in the past had what they call an iridotomy. She had a hole blasted in her trabecular meshwork with a lasers. And you know, I couldn't understand why they would have done that to that child unless she had certain problems with her pressure in her eye, intraocular pressure. and they blast a hole in it to reduce the or increase drainage of the eye pressure or the fluid in the eye. And that's why if you look closely at a picture of Maddie McCann, on one of her eyes, it's quite obvious that that child has been laser treated in the eye within it for an iridotomy, a hole. Anything otomy is a hole. An iris, so they shot her in the iris with a laser quite deliberately to improve the fluid output of her eye. Otherwise her eye would have been distorted and causes retinal damage, and she would have been failing in sight. So I did notice in McCann, and it's a very fishy thing, that child was stolen probably by the Podesta brothers, who are purveyors of children, a bit like the American Jimmy Savile types. Yes, allegedly. But that's what it's thought in the secret society circles, that it was the Podestas, hence Pizzagate. And Hillary Clinton, of course, is way behind that lot as well, since it is also already alleged that Hillary Clinton is a paedophilic lesbian. Well, and yeah, there's all sorts. I don't want to get into American theories and conspiracies, but there's too many to mention, isn't there? And we started off with the wonders of Dr. Bruce Lipton. So shall we go back there now? Folks, for any time in your lives you ever get pissed off and think you're worthless and value, you know, people are horrible to you and your friends are a nightmare, well, recognize this. I don't know if you've ever been, I have been in this situation where you rapidly realize that you've outgrown your friends. You're moving forward as you learn more. And the more you learn, the more, one thing you do know, and the wisest people in the world are the ones who appreciate just how much they don't know. They're the wisest people you will want to associate with, because you never, ever, ever stop learning until you decide that you want to stop learning. And then you can stay down the pub with the other morons. Okay. And just, what are you doing on Tuesday then, Dave? Go down the pub for a couple, yeah, watch a match, and then might have a snooze, yada, you know. Horses for courses. But you only want to make a decision. And remember, part of how you become something like, you know, butterflies start off as maggots, don't they? Or caterpillars, if you like. Flies start off as maggots, butterflies become caterpillars. And then they become chrysalis, they go through this metamorphosis. And the exciting thing about finding a chrysalis, especially a big one, is you don't know what type, unless you cheat and look in a book, you don't know what it's going to hatch. Could be a big moth, could be a beautiful butterfly, difficult to tell without looking in the books. That's part of the excitement. But can you imagine that within the cocoon, the shell, the crispy shell of that cocoon, there is magic happening. Cell division, cell communication, Lipton's communication cells on overtime, the stem cells. It's a total bloody change. You'd probably not think anything about splatting a caterpillar as you walk or you stand on a caterpillar. It just goes squitch, and that's it. But I think you think twice about standing on the beauty of a beautiful moth or a butterfly. That's different now, isn't it? Because your perception is different. It's a slug. No, it's not. Oh, never mind. It was it's okay. It was only a caterpillar. But you're not so ready to stand on a beautiful butterfly, are you? And this is why we shouldn't knock people who are less than us in many ways. They're not as rich, they're not as good looking, they're not as pretty, they're not as handsome, they're not even on your social level. But be careful, because we're all caterpillars trying to become butterflies, folks. We're born maggots and caterpillars, aren't we? We go through this metamorphosis. And what is the biggest influence and the things that change you in your life? It is the sudden realization that we're not the most special species on the planet. I'll tell you why. Why? Because I can't fly. All right? I can't go to sleep 6 months of the year and escape the horrible winters. Oh, if only. I can't do what a woodpecker does. I can't spin a spider's web. Who taught it? Who taught that spider? If ever you've watched a spider make a web, it's a revelation. And silk produced, the web produced by the spider, if you magnify it to a point of being 1/2 an inch in diameter, it'll probably be amongst the strongest material on the earth for a tensile strength, size for size. But whoever or whatever designed that spider knew that that spider puts a lot of effort in making that web, a lot of effort. And have you seen the beauty of a Dew hung, no, not Jewish, a dew, D-E-W, a dew hung spider's web in the sunlight? The beauty, the complexity, and the sheer resilience, and they are functional by design. Oh, that's just a spider, splat. That is why I'm super cautious and I get upset. I truly do. I was childish or maybe churlish, I don't know. But if I could float over anything living, I would. And yet we kill things with such aplomb, with pleasure. Arseholes in the field behind my garden, which I back onto, in the woods, every summer. Pigeons tumble from the skies to be retrieved by bloody Labradors. It's not their fault. So some fat twats can eat a little bit of breast tissue off a pigeon called the medallions. They'll throw the rest of the pigeon away. What insane people I'm surrounded by. That's why I'm disillusioned. This is why I understand what Bruce Lipton was saying. We have to learn to respect one another and respect the living creatures of this earth. Because we're all of us, temporary. We are all magnificent in our own sweet way. The most vicious dog, if it had puppies, would be the most terrific mother to those puppies. The most violent people, somewhere in their hearts and in their soul, have the ability to love. Notwithstanding psychopaths who don't and aren't born with the ability. So, don't have a downer upon yourself. And know that even if you think you're below everybody else, you're not. There's other people make themselves feel great only by making others feel worse and less than them. If that's what they need to do to feel great, you should have pity for them. But the greatest men on earth, humans, the greatest people are the ones that make less great people feel great. And I'll say it again. There is none so in need of a smile than those who simply don't. A smile is doubly blessed. It enriches those that give it, and it puts a smile on the face of those who receive it. Don't forget to smile, because you, my dear listeners, are so special. And the sweetest thing is, the majority of people like you and me don't realize it sometimes until it's simply too late. Catch you tomorrow.